Dig your hand in the land. We're gonna have a meeting, everybody.
Welcome. I'm Janet Kiewit, bringing you this week's edition of In the Tractor Seat, brought to you by Minnesota Farmers Union. Minnesota Farmers Market Executive Director Kathy Zeman is in the tractor seat this week. Thank you, audience members, for joining us today, and be sure to submit your questions via the chat feature. We'll get to them later in the program. First, a little more about Kathy. Kathy is the owner and operator of Simple Harvest Farm Organics in Nerstrand, Minnesota, which is a 20-acre grass-based organic livestock farm. Kathy produces value-added products including goat milk, soap, and beeswax lip balm. As both a farmer and local foods advocate, Kathy serves on numerous regional and statewide boards and committees and works closely with the state agencies, including the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the Minnesota Department of Health, on food licensing and other issues. In 2020, she testified before a U.S. House Ag Subcommittee on the importance of local food programs. And earlier this year, Kathy was one of 2 nationwide recipients of the Farmers Market Coalition's Gus Schumacher Award for Leadership. Thank you, Kathy, for joining us today.
Thanks, Janet, for having me. Appreciate being here.
Do you want to start off and tell us more about the Gus Schumacher Award?
I sure can. It was certainly a surprise, right? Because I thought we were probably just doing our job, trying to keep everything going. So when COVID-19 hit early in March of 2020, which seems like a long, long time ago, we immediately got deemed as being essential services. And so during all of 2020, all farmers markets could stay open. I mean, we definitely had to work with MDA and MDH to make sure that, and then OSHA, to make sure that we were doing all the precautions, right, to keep everybody safe. And just think during the year, we didn't know a lot in the beginning and then knew a lot more at the end, and we just had to keep changing all along. So we did that. And we had good partners, right? We have great partners in our state agencies. That didn't happen in all states, I guess. So a lot of states had farmers markets shut down. Whereas in Minnesota, because we understand little ag, and we understand that there's 4,000 some, local vendors out here, that in March, plants were already in greenhouses growing, right? The chickens were laying eggs, lambs were lambing, goats were kidding. I mean, everything was growing and ready for the season. So we couldn't shut down. We were just like, yeah. So Commissioner Peterson said, well, sure. Farmers markets are, grocery stores. We just are outside usually. And being outside helped us. So anyway, we kept everything going. And because of that, Farmers Market Coalition, said that we did a good job. And that's how we got the Gus Schumacher Award. So it was a great privilege and a great honor. But really, it's a great tribute to Minnesota, right? And our system and our partnerships and everybody who works together to keep the local food shed viable. So it's just kudos to Minnesota.
Well, I looked up Gus. He was a undersecretary for USDA, I believe.
Yeah, there's quite a few programs written for him. And he's a former board member of National Farmers Market Coalition. He was all about getting food to people. I mean, this whole thing was food access, food security. So he's named in quite a few things, yeah.
So tell us about, I heard you last week talking about how many producers there are that grow produce in the state of Minnesota. And could you tell us more, give us the numbers.
So sometimes those are fighting words, right? Because we're not always sure how to do that. So we did work with Dan Mahoney, with the US, our USDA AMS person here in Minnesota, to make sure that we were sorting the tables right. Because we do know that this drought has been horrific for so many of our produce farmers. So when you look at the data in the ag census, there are more produce farmers. So when you look at, they put them into 2 different categories. It's vegetables and melons, and then nuts and trees. So but when you add those 2 figures together, you end up with about 1,900 produce farmers. And you have to sort on the commodity that the farmer reported was their primary, right? So they might have said, I'm primarily produce, but they might also have chickens or something. But you sort on that, and you end up with 1,900 some produce farmers and 1,600 some pig farmers. And again, so that's pretty critical. If you think about now, and then we have to we don't have really good data, Janet, to put together what the economic value is yet. That's what one of the grants that we're working with. So the University of Minnesota and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture did that FSMIP grant. Don't ask me what those initials stand for. But it's a 3-year grant, and we're in our first year, and there's all like 40 or 50 of us are partners in it. This year we're planning, and next year we're going to begin that survey to find out, like, to get into that detail, like what is the economic impact of all of these produce farmers out there? And then we'll continue to grow that. Like, what about, like, it's very hard to capture the economic value of a farm like mine. It just doesn't show up anywhere. And yet, right, we've got a very profitable farm here, but we don't show up in any data. So, and I think that's important to measure. It's important to measure what our economic value is of the local food shed. So that's all coming in the future. I know we're trying to build a culture of data collection. Could you, I mean, is that the most boring thing you've ever heard? But it is important to measure what we're doing out here.
Well, and when the federal government started doing the coronavirus food assistance program, those grants, you have to have that data to qualify.
Right. Correct. And that's, again, a stumbling block, right? And so sometimes we don't even know, we're not even asking the right people. It's like there are people that we're not asking the questions to. So we'll get better at it now, that because we kind of know now. When you start saying there's more produce farmers in the state than pig farmers, you get people's attention, right?
Yeah. And
it's not to be dismissive of anybody. It's just to say these are, produce farmers are a big number, and we should, if we're willing to give tax dollars to corn, soybean. So if you think about that, the farm bill is supposed to be a safety net, right? Yeah. Well, it's really only a safety net, though, for a very small category of farmers and a very small category of commodities. And yet, like, I was being sarcastic one morning, and I said, I'm pretty sure for breakfast you did not have a bowl of soybeans and a bowl of corn kernels, right? But you probably had maybe eggs from a local farmer or bacon from a local farmer, and you had fruit, you had strawberries and blueberries. So if you think
apples,
right? If you think about where our tax dollars go versus the food you eat on a day-to-day basis, maybe we should be investing as much as, not to take anything away from the commodities, but maybe we should be investing as much as in the food that we really eat every day. And that's what my point would be. And that's why we need data, right? Because we don't really know, we don't know how to quantify that very well. Okay.
Well, and let's talk about the growing season impact on those 1,900 produce farmers across the state of Minnesota.
Well, down here, Janet, you and I are down here in Southeast Minnesota, and I think we have survivor's guilt, right? I mean, we did a kind of okay.
Yeah.
My farm, in May and June, that was scary because we did not have enough rain, and I overgrazed pastures because there was, I'm certified organic, so I got to have certified organic hay. Well, there wasn't any. So now you're running animals through pastures quickly just to try to, get them some feed. But we did okay. That 2/3, 3/4 of northern Minnesota. So here's how it impacted produce farmers. A lot of our produce farmers don't own land. They are on leased or rented land. If you have leased or rented land, you don't always have wells. So they had to hire, so there was no moisture early in the year. They had to find trucks that then they hired to haul in trucked water just to get seeds to germinate. And then not only did it get dry, then it got hot. We heard of miles, probably not miles, but a long lines of peppers. If you think about sometimes in order to get ahead of, if you don't want to use chemicals, you can use plastic, right? For weed protection. It got so hot that it burned the roots up underneath all those plants. I mean, there was just horror stories all over. We Thursday night we had a drought session, and Liz Dwyer from Clearwater, Minnesota, said that her CSA CSA, community supported agriculture. So you pay an amount of money to her, and then every week you get a basket of vegetables that you're supposed to eat every week, by the way, Janet. I think the only time I eat enough vegetables during the summer is when I have a CSA, because you got to get through those. Anyway, her CSA had to end 8 weeks early because they just didn't have produce. They didn't have enough. And across the state, Minnesota, at farmers markets, there are some crops that just didn't show up, or they showed up late and then in smaller supplies. So we had produce farmers that, and if you are on rented leased lands, you don't have that well, then sometimes you're literally, so you wouldn't be able to hook a drip tape up for irrigation. You're irrigating with pails. I mean, so maybe they were putting in 10-hour days before, now they're putting in 16-hour days. And even then, and then because of the heat and the drought, then more insects showed up, then more funguses showed up, then more diseases showed up. So, and for produce farmers, there is no crop insurance, right? Someone said, if somebody brings up NAP one more time, so NAP is an insurance program that supposedly works for produce. No, it does not. So we're gonna write a grant to see if the new wave. So Secretary Vilsack said that this new and improved whole farm insurance program will work for produce. We'll see. We're going to test that. We're going to run some numbers through it and just see what is the break even for what kind of an operation. But traditionally, there is no crop insurance, and there would not be any, like for my kind of a farm, there's no insurance program that you could get at all that would make any kind of sense here. I could, like right now, the current whole farm insurance program, the premiums would be way higher than any kind of payout I could get. I would literally waste money. It would cost me money to sign up for that. So it doesn't, again, they're really designed for commodity farms, not for like 1900 produce farms. And so I would say we need a balance here, right? There should be some equity, some justice in the system, unless you really do want to eat a bowl of soybeans and corn kernels for breakfast. I don't.
Well, wasn't there getting back to the weather? Wasn't there frost early on too?
Right.
I remember it went from cold to hot like within a week.
So in northern Minnesota, there were they had 2 hard frosts up there, but that last frost, like Double T Acres on their Facebook page showed them at midnight to 3 o'clock, they're spraying water on their blueberries in order to try to hold them. Well, other people didn't really have capacity to do overhead irrigation. So we lost, there's a whole orchards in northern Minnesota that got wiped out. We have down by Mankato, a couple of orchards got wiped out. That late frost took them out pretty well. So yeah, our fruit and our vegetables, it's a huge industry in the state that we don't know a lot about because we don't collect good data on them. So if you think about our crop reports, right? Crop reports come out and they'll say what % of corn emerged, what % of soybeans, right? Germinated, blah, blah, blah. We never, in those crop reports, in the input forms, we never ask what % of the apple orchards have blossoms? And yet Minnesota apples, right? We have a whole breeding program here in the state of Minnesota with the University of Minnesota, and yet we don't ask that question. So if you only ask certain questions, you only get certain answers. And I would argue that we should be asking, how are the berries doing? How are the apples doing, right? How are the vegetables doing? And so again, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the answers that we need. And so we're building a culture of data collection in Minnesota.
Well, I know I asked my neighborhood apple grower, how are the apples coming? And he said, oh,
I know.
So
I do believe that the dry weather helped tomatoes. I think tomatoes were having a fairly decent year. That's what I've heard.
And there was another crop I heard too. Oh, grapes. Grapes like it drier.
Grapes, yeah. But otherwise, so it helps that there are a couple of crops that didn't mind a really dry year and a really hot year. But for the most part, it breaks your heart when you hear those stories about dairy farms that had to sell cows.
I know.
And I know of several of them that managed to move out their meat livestock and just trying to hang on to the genetics and the breeding, right? And the breeding herds, that would be. And feed prices are going to go high. They're already creeping high. My feed cost is up 20%.
Tell us a little more about everything that you raise on your farm, because I know you have more than beeswax and goat milk.
So my land is all highly erodible. So highly erodible is a term. So my land is all between 6 and 24% slope. And if you have highly erodible land, you put it in grass. When I bought this farm, it was in row crop, severe soil erosion. You just, if your land is bare for a lot of the year, you just can't hang on to soil. So we put it in grass. And then if you have it grass, you're going to graze. And so we graze. I have pastured pork and goat and sheep and broilers, so chickens and laying hens, and then turkeys, some ducks, no longer geese. Geese got to be a little bit too much, and then meat rabbits. So anything that can graze, we will raise it. And then, over the winter, we hang on to the breeding flocks. And then it's during the summer that we work really hard because that's when everybody's out on grass. They get moved daily.
And one of the issues that Farmers Union is working on is access to processing. Do you have access to processing for your livestock?
No. Well, so I'm spoiled. 7 miles from my house is a custom exempt meatpacking plant. And because of COVID-19, Dory Gregory's the owner. So one of the few female owned, packing meat lockers in the state. She reached out right away and said, okay, now the big livestock farmers that lost, the big processing are coming in and asking to buy up all the spots. So she said, I'm going to get all of you regular customers locked in. So Janet, I'm now locked in through 2023. I've never been this organized, never. So a lot of little plants did that. They locked in their regulars and then they could let in new customers, right? But I'm custom exempt, which means that I have a very limited market, correct? I can only sell directly to customers. I can't sell it with a custom exempt plant. So if I wanted to get to a state plant or a USDA plant, they don't really exist, and certainly not for poultry. This is really a huge problem in Minnesota. We need a lot. So if you look at it, there's a handful of USDA plants that we can get to. And then the last I heard, there's like 40 some state inspected. If you go through a state inspected plant, you can sell any place in the state of Minnesota. So you could sell to hospitals and grocery stores and schools. USDA, you need USDA to cross the state line. You need state to go into the commerce. And then custom exempt, you can only sell directly to people. There's 255 custom exempt plants in Minnesota, but that's very limiting then though of where your market is, correct? And so we do know in COVID-19, when the plants all kind of got in trouble, people butchered animals on their farms. Now they did it safely, but that might not have met the legal compliance standard. But when you got animals to go and you've got hungry people, when the system fails you, the people will take care of themselves. And so I love the fact that Minnesota Farmers Union took leadership, statewide leadership in standing up this problem and helping find resources and helping the conversation. So, the program that MFU was behind up there at the colleges, right? The Central
Lakes and Staples and Ridgewater and Wilmer.
That's huge. That is huge. And I think it's not only, getting the programs in place, now we need to train people. And then that industry needs to pay people enough, right, to stay in those, because you're butchering animals. So that's hard work, and it's blood and it's guts and it's right. And so we need to be able to pay those people enough. We had, on one of the groups I'm on, somebody said, oh, I can't believe the prices I have to pay to get my chickens butchered. And I said, give them a bonus. But if you got somebody who is willing to, process your poultry, tip them, because there's not enough in this state anywhere to get that done. So we've got Minnesota people, we got a lot of Minnesota people having to butcher in Wisconsin because they're the only place you can find a licensed either state or USDA. So it's a huge problem. And I love Farmers Union's leadership in this.
Is there still a program where you can be equal to for processing?
So that's the Minnesota state. So it stands for equal to USDA. So there's no difference in your food safety standards at all. It's just who pays for that food inspector to be there. And then it's a way to control the market. The law says it's got to be USDA to cross a state line. But as far as the food safety inspection, whether you're in a USDA plant or an equal to USDA and a Minnesota inspected plant, same food safety. It just controls where you can sell your product. There are a couple of states that have petitioned that under equal to, can they cross the state line? And again, it's got nothing to do with food safety. That is about controlling the market. I would argue that if they're the same food safety, you should be able to sell where you need to sell.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Again, it's a political decision. It's not food safety based.
I'm going to remind the audience to submit their questions for Kathy, and we will make sure to get those answered. And then we're gonna talk about how many farmers markets there are in Minnesota. Since we're talking about the Farmers Market Association, how many are there? I know there's a big one in Rochester. There's a little one in Manorville I see when I drive through there. They're all over.
There's 87 counties in Minnesota, and we know of about 346 farmers markets. During COVID, because we have our AmeriCorps Vista with Smith, so Minnesota Farmers Market Association, Renewing the Countryside, and Sustainable Farming Association of Minnesota teamed up with the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. And we brought in 2 AmeriCorps Vistas. And so James Heron and Maeve Malazi Kelly are 2 Vistas, and they are collecting data in the 20 southeast counties in Minnesota that are in Smith's region, finding out where are all of these local food producers, direct marketing farmers, where are all the farmers markets. So Maeve found 20 new farmers markets. So we said, call the Chamber of Commerce's, Maeve. Let's just call people. You need people to do this. So Maeve began calling, and then, you find, there's one here in Morristown. There's one in Waterbury. All of a sudden we found all these farmers markets. Many of the brand new ones probably started because of COVID-19. Well, so in the state of Minnesota, you don't have to have a license or permit to start a farmer's market. You can just start a farmer's market. If you're selling at a farmer's market because of certain products you might sell, then there might be the rules and laws. Like if you're an egg farmer, you have to keep your eggs at 45 degrees. So how you do that at a farmer's market, it's up to you, but you got to keep them at 45 degrees. So, and then produce, there's some labeling requirements, but not a lot for produce. So you can, anyway, 346. So that's a lot of farmers markets, right?
Yeah.
And I would argue there could be more, because that would mean more and more people are growing food somewhere. And that's what they should do, right? That's how you become resilient. So,
well, and that's how you find them, by counting them.
Right.
So if you get somebody counting in Southwest or Northeast, you might find more.
So our long-term plan is to stand up 9 regional hubs or centers in Minnesota. So like if you are in if you're in Northeast Minnesota, then like David Abaz is the director of that Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. Then he'll kind of help those markets up there. Because, if you think about it, this is a big state, and we're not always all going to get together physically anywhere in one year, right? Maybe at the state fair, but then no one wants to go to educational things, so that doesn't work. So we want like 3 across the north, 3 in the middle, and then 3 in the south. And then those are regional, and then all of those markets can work together, right? To figure out how they can help each other, how they can complement each other, how they can work with a lot of our medical centers now want to donate money to farmers markets so that they can give prescriptions to people to eat more vegetables, right? And so that's called Veggie RX. So you can see how that works kind of then, to have regional centers throughout the state. It would make it much easier than to help those markets if you have 9 big hubs or centers, and then let those work together. And then those 9 get together maybe once or twice a year to work together as a state organization. It'll make it a lot easier to capture data, right? We'll know where the holes are, where the gaps are, where we need to put things. So yeah, that's our long-term plan. But 346, and there's probably 4,000 some vendors at farmers markets. There are more vendors, but some of them sell at more than one market.
Yeah.
So not to double count people, but yeah, give or take, on any given day, we've got 346 markets and about 4,000 vendors.
We've got a couple questions.
Okay.
The first one is, do you know if food shelves in Minnesota buy from equal to producers?
They
If the
can.
product is from Minnesota.
That is legal. They could do that. Yes.
Oh.
So meat, if I understood the question.
Venison,
Go ahead.
thinking venison, poultry, and beef.
So venison is in a different category. So we'll put venison over on the side. But what were the other ones they asked about?
Poultry and beef.
So all of the red meats, beef, pig, lamb, sheep, llama, maybe, I don't know, probably somebody just yelled at me for saying the word llama and eating them. I don't know. But those animals, meat, rabbit, poultry, as long as they are butchered at an E2, which would be a Minnesota inspected plant, or USDA, they are legal to be sold to or used in a food shelf. Eggs are the same way. Eggs can go into a food shelf. The only place I've ever seen some institutional limitations on eggs, some assisted living facilities will say that eggs need to be pasteurized, and that's really just because of their very vulnerable population, that there might be some individuals in their facility, but legally, yes, they could. Venison is different. Venison can be donated. They got a couple of different rules on venison, and I don't know if they could go to a food shelf. They can go to some donated, that's not off the top of my head.
And then we have another question in regards to CPAP 2.
Mhm.
How can we get chokecherry, Saskatoon, serviceberry on that eligible specialty crops list?
That's so the specialty crops definitions come from USDA.
Okay.
So if we really want to influence the number of products on the USDA, we would work with our federal partners. So then we ask Mr. Laurie Stu to help us, right?
Okay.
So then we would go back to our federal partners and say, and remember, isn't it Senator Klobuchar and Representative Craig? We've got people on ag committees, Senator Smith, right? So we would go back to those folks and we would ask them to help us. And we go to National Farmers Union. So if we need to add products to that, it's in the chat, Janet. Let's forward that on and let's see if we can't get an answer back to that person. But that's a federal decision.
Okay. So they'd have to reach out to, perhaps, is there a USDA contact in Minnesota they could reach out to as well?
Yeah, we reach out to Stu.
Okay. We're just send that one to Stu.
We just send anything to deal with the politics side, we send to Stu, and then he helps us figure it out.
We have a question about the cottage food law changes.
Mhm.
And there was changes to the gross income limits on that. How does that impact produce growers?
A lot. So this is really good. So as of August 1st, the changes that happened for cottage food, you still register as an individual. So I register as Kathy Zeman, but I can sell my cottage food now under my LLC. So finally, we can use our LLC, our limited liability, as our risk management tool. That was critical. So it's kind of a dance between how you're going to word it in the law and make sure we were all legal. So now now the law says you register as an individual, but you can sell any way you want to. So you could do a S Corp, a C Corp, we don't care. You can now sell, that helps. They did raise the sales cap to $78,000. So before it was down at 18,000, now you can sell up to 78,000. Once you go past 78,000, you get a license. So that's pretty cool. We are now making the tier 1. So anybody who sells between $0 and $5,000, you register for free and you train for free, but now we're going to ask you to train every year. And for the first time ever, you have to pass a test, because before it was voluntary, and we could tell that not everybody maybe got through the voluntary training. And that ended up with like 5.2 million questions to my office and to the Minnesota Cottage Food Producers office. And so I'm like, okay, I don't think people are actually reading it. So now you have to read it and take a test and pass that shows, yep, I actually did read and I kind of understand what I'm supposed to do. Then once you get to tier 2, so you're selling between 5,001 and up to 78,000, you register every year, but you only take your training every 3 years. And that the University of Minnesota, and I actually recommend everybody takes that tier 2 training. It is $50. It goes to the University of Minnesota Extension, but it is phenomenal training. And it will protect you on that foodborne illness, like a food product liability kind of side. So I recommend if you got $50, go ahead and take that course at least once every 3 years, and it'll be well worth your while. So that happened. You no longer have to put your home address on your label. You can put your registration number on there for safety purposes. There was an incident of an Iowa cottage food producer was attacked in her home. And because the almost law said, so that's for traceability. If there's ever a problem, we got to know where that food was made. So they said, you have to have your home address. Now you can put your registration number so that if there still is a problem, MDA can help figure that out, where it came from, but it's not open to the public. That was good. And now for the first time ever, and I love this, and we didn't come up with it, but whoever did was a genius. Now every single cottage food product has to have a label that says these products are homemade and not subject to inspection, because that's transparency. Right now, the customer knows exactly that this was made in a home kitchen and not under inspection. So if they have any concerns, they should buy only licensed, right? They should only go to a licensed bakery or a licensed. And where this helps produce farmers. Now you can sell $78,000 worth of your salsas that you make with your, if you think about a produce farmer, not every tomato is beautiful, right? Not every pepper is beautiful. So you can take some of those seconds, make them into salsas. I always say produce farmers show up at farmers markets in the spring in jars because they've made all of their produce into canned goods. And so this way they can, they still have to do the work, right? They have to raise all the produce, they have to can all of that, follow all the food safety, but now they can make a livable wage. And so that's a good thing on the cottage food. And then finally, we got pet treats. So my key to some of the state legislators was, can we please pass this so the kids that are selling at the farmers markets can be legal? So the problem is that nobody knew that you couldn't sell pet treats without a commercial license. And it was like $175 plus a food nutrition label. I mean, but nobody knows. And kids all over were baking dog treats because that's what you would do as a kid. And so now they can make it under cottage food. So it's and again, there's always been an exempt list. Like if you have pig's ears, you can sell, that's exempt from a license too. So pig's ears, there's a list of them, like hooves and that kind of stuff, like byproducts of an animal. So those are all of the cool things under cottage food that we're very happy with. It's a good thing. It's a good move. It's a great move for the local food shed. I mean, now you got people that can make, just by raising food and having, great recipes and following mandated food safety, they can make a livable wage. That would be great. Just think of that. The local food shed, Janet, never gets touched by trade wars. Never gets touched by tariffs, right? We're not in the international market. We're in the local market. So, I mean, if we were smart, we'd figure out a way to create like local toilet paper, apparently. But maybe that's where hemp comes in. I don't know. That's outside of my milk house. But that's where I think it would be fun, right? Because local, then, follow food safety, be legal. It's a tremendous market. Great sales channel.
Well, thank you, Kathy. We are at our time.
Okay.
Thank you for being our guest.
Dan, it's been good to see and talk with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and next week we have Uni Beals talking about rural investment to protect our environment, which is a plan to pay farmers directly for the environmental services they provide. Till next week, learn more about Minnesota Farmers Union and become a member at mfu.org. Thank you.
Dig your hand in the land.